expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections.
Today, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas escalated his challenge to President Biden's border policies allows Texas law enforcement officials to arrest migrants who enter the state from Mexico without legal authorization. Now, this is setting the stage for a showdown with the federal government. Abbott pushed for the legislation, which passed in a special session of the Republican-dominated state legislature last month, over the strong objections of Democrats, immigrant rights groups, and Hispanic organizations who argued that the measure violated the U.S. Constitution and would encourage racial profiling. Well, an agency created 54 years ago to bolster minority-owned businesses is fighting for its existence amid a legal challenge from white entrepreneurs who contend its mission is misguided and unconstitutional. The Minority Business Development Agency, housed within the Commerce Department, is one of several federal programs under siege over a fundamental assumption ingrained in Washington policy, that certain racial and ethnic groups are inherently disadvantaged in American society and therefore entitled to preferential treatment. The legal offensive, which also has targeted programs run by the Transportation Department and the Small Business Administration, is part of a broader conservative backlash against affirmative action and diversity efforts in government contracting and the private sector. And a jury on Friday ordered Rudolph Giuliani to pay $148 million to two former Georgia election workers who said he had destroyed their reputations with the lies that they tried to steal the 2020 election from Donald Trump. Judge Beryl Howell of the Federal District Court in Washington had already ruled that Giuliani had defamed the two workers, Rudy Freeman and Shay Moss. The jury had been asked to decide only on the amount of the damages. The jury awarded Ms. Freeman and Ms. Moss a combined $75 million in punitive damages. It also ordered Giuliani to pay compensatory damages of $16.2 million to Ms. Freeman and $16.9 million, that is, to Ms. Moss, as well as $20 million each to both of them for their emotional suffering. We'll talk more about that when we come forward. But further news today, payback, retaliation, revenge. That's all what Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton now believes that he's in a position to do. Paxton believes he is, in fact, bulletproof, and his financial backers are pouring money into his campaign accounts for candidates who challenged him and who voted to impeach him. And according to Paxton, he has higher ambitions, maybe as governor of the state or possibly a U.S. senator. 3 Israeli hostages who were shot and killed by Israeli forces in Gaza on Friday were bearing a makeshift white flag, according to the Israeli military. They asserted that soldiers violated the military's rules of engagement when they shot and killed the 3 hostages. The Israeli military announced the accidental killings on Fridays, hours after saying it had recovered the bodies of 3 other Israeli hostages in Gaza. The death underscores the continuing risk for the more than 120 people who Israel says remain in captivity after being kidnapped during the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th. And Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is facing calls from a growing number of Democrats who say he should recuse himself from a case examining former President Trump's presidential immunity, with House members now raising concerns about the justice's ability to remain impartial, given his wife's involvement in the movement to overturn the 2020 election results. The immunity case is the latest test of the court's recently released code of conduct. Last month, all 9 justices, including Thomas, signed on to a 14-page document outlining how they would perform their official duties. This is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. And this is hour 2 of Areva Martin in real time, and this is the hour where we go deep, where we dig behind those headlines and bring you those stories that have people talking. And today, one of the biggest news stories over the weekend was this nuclear verdict against disgraced Mayor Giuliani. And this kind of man that was considered to be a top contender for president of the United States on the GOP ticket, and who was lauded as someone who brought us through a very, very dark period in this country after the 9/11 terrorist attacks that we saw. How did this man who had so much credibility and was held in such high esteem, had worked as a U.S. attorney, had an impeccable at one point reputation as a lawyer in New York City. How did this man find himself the subject of a defamation lawsuit where he is now been, a jury verdict has been rendered that requires him to pay 2 Georgia election workers who he had never met a day in his life, to pay these 2 women $148 million. And now, just today, another lawsuit filed against Rudy Giuliani. When we come forward, Michael Imhotep, who's a historian and a researcher and radio host, is going to join us, as well as David Sarsky. David is an attorney, a litigation trial attorney, and he actually practiced law and worked for the New York Parks Department during the years that Rudy Giuliani was mayor of New York. So he has a lot of inside information. We'll talk to David and Michael when we come forward, and hopefully they'll help us make sense of this story involving New York City's disgraced mayor, Rudy Giuliani. When we come forward, more on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Areva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on Unapologetically Progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your ear.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
All right, we are back. Michael and David are joining me in this segment, and we're talking about Rudy Giuliani and this nuclear $148 million verdict that was rendered against him in a civil defamation action filed by two Georgia election workers after Rudy Giuliani defamed them. Let me start with you, David. Help us understand what happened legally. We know the judge had already made a determination that Rudy defamed these two women, and this trial was really about damages. What do you think resonated with these jurors to cause them to come up with such a large jury verdict?
I think you have to start with the fact that Rudy wasn't allowed to really put on a defense. And this goes back to Giuliani's failure to comply repeatedly with the judge's orders about discovery, requiring him to turn over electronic information, requiring him to turn over documents, communications. Back in August, the judge issued a 60-page decision detailing Giuliani's misconduct and the way that he had subverted the litigation process. And I think the fact that there really wasn't any defense, and it was really just about liability or damages, really probably made a mark on the jurors. And the evidence that they heard was jarring. It was about racist attacks, about threats at their homes, electronically, communications, telephone calls, all kinds of things to really make these women's lives really quite unbearable. And the jury returned a verdict for $30 million of defamation damages, another $40 million for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and then piled on top of that another $75 million of punitive damages to teach America's mayor a lesson about the judicial system. So I think that's really what went into it. It was really a one-sided kind of landslide presentation with, an individual who had demonstrated real contempt for the process.
So help us understand, David, why didn't Rudy participate in discovery? What was going on? Was it because he has this criminal case pending?
Yeah, I think if you read the judge's decision, the judge actually commented that he may well have made a strategic calculation that it was to his advantage to just take the penalties that the judge would impose in the civil litigation. Remember, Giuliani is also facing a criminal indictment down in Georgia. He's potentially an unindicted co-conspirator in federal court in D.C. And this is really just the first of the shoes to fall. So it may well have just been strategic behavior. He didn't want to turn over the evidence that would go against him in these criminal prosecutions.
All right, Michael. So these two women are in court. They get the verdict of a lifetime, $148 million. Right. Can they run to the bank with any of this?
Well, not just yet. We know that he intimated he will probably file an appeal, but we know he's suffering from major financial challenges as well. He has legal fees that he owes attorneys. And then also a few months ago, it was reported that Donald Trump owed him $3 million in back legal fees. There was a fundraiser that Trump spoke at on behalf of Rudy Giuliani's benefit. It was reported that they raised $1 million there. So attorneys for Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman have said that they're basically everything's on the table to try to collect on this. They probably don't expect to get $148 million. That's not going to happen. On appeal, it's possible it gets knocked down, but they're talking about garnishing wages. They're also talking about putting liens on any properties that he owns. We know he has a $6 million plus apartment that's up for sale. So, this is huge. Even if they don't collect a single dime on this, this is huge because this follows along the $787 million settlement that Dominion Voting Systems got from Fox News because of lies Fox News spread regarding the 2020 election. And then we also know the $2.7 billion lawsuit is up next in court with Smartmatic. So that lawsuit is even larger than the original lawsuit from Dominion. So this is there's going to be other lawsuits behind this as well, and this is civil, as the attorney said. Rudy Giuliani is facing 13 counts in the Georgia racketeering criminal trial as well. So, there's a lot more to come with this, but this is really good news.
Yeah, David, help us understand. You were a lawyer in one of the city departments when Rudy Giuliani was mayor of New York. So for those of us that live on the West Coast or in the Midwest and, don't know a whole lot about the inner workings of New York City, how can a man who led us through 9/11, who was once considered America's mayor, how did he get to this point where he is one of America's most disgraced mayors and now going to be running for his life, trying to hold on to whatever he has, the shirt on his back, because the attorneys for these two women have said if a dime shows up in any account that he has, they're going to be there to collect it. So this is going to be a very difficult period. And we'll talk about the implications for those criminal charges that Michael reminded us of. But just tell us something about Rudy that will help us understand how he got to this point.
Well, this was my first job out of college. I worked for the Parks Department for the commissioner, so I wasn't quite a lawyer yet, but I did have the chance to work in the Giuliani administration, and it's really remarkable how far Rudy Giuliani has come, because back then he was regarded as, or he regarded himself as, a real advocate for good government and for just innovation in city government. New York is a tough place to manage, but one of the things that Mayor Giuliani was really known for was really driving a narrative, being out there on the streets, being in the media, understanding just how the mayor of New York City could use that bully pulpit to make change. It wasn't always good, it wasn't always smart, but it was often aggressive and often change making, which is to his credit. But Rudy Giuliani made his bones as a prosecutor using the RICO statutes to take down insider trading and mafia dons, and the RICO statutes back then were very new, and it was an innovative practice. I guess you could say it's a little bit of a phenomenon of the arsonist and the firefighter, where he took a lot of credit for employing those statutes against organized crime, and now 30, 40 years later, it sure looks a lot like he's part of it.
So help us, David, understand what options these two plaintiffs have in terms of collecting this money. A lot of talks about bankruptcy and other. We know, as Michael said, there's this New York apartment that's apparently up for sale. We know he has a lot of debt. I read an article that says he has some back phone bills that he owes. So he owes, a lot of folks money. Is this a debt that is dischargeable in bankruptcy? And what are the chances that these two plaintiffs will see any money from Rudy Giuliani?
Well, I think they should be hoping for the federal indictment to name him as a co-conspirator, because, the federal prison system pays its inmates about 30 cents an hour. And at that rate, 56,000 years from now or something like that, Rudy Giuliani might be able to pay back the $148 million he's going to owe. If he gets convicted down in Georgia, I don't think they pay their inmates. So, that'd be a problem for them. In terms of bankruptcy, some of this probably will be dischargeable if he goes through bankruptcy. The compensatory damages, the $33 million for defamation, the $40 million for emotional distress are likely dischargeable. Excuse me. The punitive damages are probably not dischargeable. Alex Jones tried that maneuver recently in connection with the Sandy Hook litigation. Liability that comes from willful misconduct or egregious misconduct is typically not dischargeable by a bankruptcy court, because the bankruptcy judge is looking at what's fair and what's equitable. And if somebody's adjudicated to have engaged in willful or reckless conduct, that's a debt that probably won't be dischargeable. whether Rudy Giuliani is ever in a position to pay back $75 million, I think remains a very open question.
So, Michael, there's some breaking news today about another lawsuit. Tell us about that lawsuit. Who filed it and what are they asking for?
So in this second lawsuit, this was filed by Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss again, and they are calling for Rudy Giuliani to stop making defamatory statements about them. So right after the verdict, the decision in the civil lawsuit, Rudy Giuliani made some more disparaging remarks about them outside of the courthouse, and basically said he had evidence to back up what he was saying. And what's interesting is there were 62 lawsuits filed on behalf of Donald Trump and his allies, 62 lawsuits filed challenging the 2020 presidential elections in various states, what have you. And if Rudy Giuliani had any evidence, he had ample opportunity to present this evidence in court. They lost 61 of those 62 lawsuits. Okay. So, and the one they won, that was in Philadelphia. That just dealt with how close poll watchers could be to poll workers counting the votes. So he had ample time. And then, and keep in mind, he chose not to testify in the lawsuit where he was ordered to pay $148 million, even though the day before he said he would testify. Okay. So with this lawsuit filed today, so far, they're not asking for any monetary damages. They just want the lies to stop being told by Rudy Giuliani. So we'll see what happens with this case here.
David, we saw something very similar in the E. Jean Carroll case where Donald Trump had been sued, a $5 million judgment or $5 million verdict in that case against Donald Trump. He then goes right outside the courthouse, or literally, and defames her. And then there's a second lawsuit. Is this a new strategy that we're going to see with these men or these defendants like Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani, who can't help themselves, who literally just keep lying and lying and lying, I assume not following any advice of counsel?
Well, I think what you're seeing is you're seeing a fairly basic breakdown in the polity in the American among American voters. There's a cleavage here between people who believe in the system and believe in rules and regulations and following the justice system as it's laid out, and people who simply want to break it and deny facts, deny process, will not adhere. And I think what you are seeing is the result of that. Maybe the $5 million defamation verdict against Trump felt like it wasn't enough, and so you saw another lawsuit for damages. Here, you've got a $75 million verdict. I don't know, frankly, how much more there is to be gained by suing him again for more money. But to Michael's point, it should be a relatively downhill battle. It should be a downhill run to get a judge to enter injunctive relief to preclude or to direct Rudy to stop telling lies that are defamatory and that are really injurious to people.
But Michael, I don't think Rudy, like Trump, can help himself, because there is this part of the MAGA base that's cheering him on, that cheers Donald Trump on, and loves this hubris, this, like you said, I got these facts and I'm going to reveal them. I'm going to testify. And we just know when they're like Donald Trump was going to testify in this $250 million fraud lawsuit in New York. And we knew he was not going to testify. And we knew when Rudy Giuliani said that. Are people really falling for this, Michael?
Yeah, yes, some people are falling for this. There were 74 million votes that Donald Trump got in 2020. Yes, some people are still falling for this con game. And keep in mind, after 2 months after the November 2020 election, Donald Trump raised $250 million from his followers to file these frivolous lawsuits to overturn the election results. So yes, there are a lot of idiots out here who are still falling for this nonsense. We look at the speech, a campaign trail Donald Trump gave in New Hampshire, echoing Adolf Hitler as well this past Saturday. So yes, there are people who are still dumb enough to fall for this. What has to happen is that the masses of voters have to be properly educated, and we have to stop Donald Trump and his acolytes at the ballot box come November 2024.
Yeah, real quickly, before we go to break, David, how likely is it that if an injunction is issued, that Rudy will stop defaming these two women? It seems like he's just made this a part of his, routine to get media attention.
Well, the next penalty would be, court-imposed sanctions or fines or ultimately criminal contempt if he were not to follow the injunction. We have seen instances where when the injunctions have been issued against Trump and his ilk, they do tend to adhere because they do not want to cross or threaten a judge into holding them in contempt. But I think, to Michael's point, you have to ask why they do this. Why do they say things that are so brazenly false? And I think this becomes a question of media studies, right? It becomes a question of how are they using the media? How are they using the narrative in public to distract from the facts, from what they've actually done, from what is actually going on, and divert the conversation to this meta narrative about, well, why is Rudy Giuliani so crazy these days? Why is Donald Trump doing this? And it becomes a distraction so that in the background, other things can be going on and other actions can be taken. And I think that's really the pernicious, that's really the most dangerous aspect of this, is that it's distracting and it's disorienting for people who are probably not as dialed in as your listeners, Areva, and aren't paying as much attention, but they get a fragment here and they get a bit there, and they see Rudy Giuliani denying it and saying he didn't have a chance to put a defense up. And, you take bits and starts and all of a sudden, you just don't know which way to turn.
No, really good point, David. When we come forward, I want to talk about what does any of this mean for the criminal charges we know he's facing in Georgia and likely to face in a federal criminal case where he's an unnamed co-conspirator. Stay with us. More about Rudy Giuliani and this mess he's created for himself right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union, weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580, weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Time, that's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. As KBLA Talk 1580's chief national political analyst, every day you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, A More Perfect Union was designed for you. This daily political affairs show will feature notable journalists, industry leaders, lawmakers, change makers, tastemakers, and ordinary people motivated to do their part to reach beyond today's divisions, to make sense out of news of the day, and offer us all a chance to build a more perfect union. Come on and join me.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though?
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Areva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader. If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcasts of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black.
Follow the leader.
Following the leader.
Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
We are back, and in this segment, we're talking about Rudy Giuliani and this $148 million nuclear verdict, as well as this recent lawsuit where Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman have asked the court to enter an injunction to prevent Rudy Giuliani from continuing to defame them. Michael Inhotep is here. He's a radio host as well as a historian, and David Slarsky, who is a New York civil litigation attorney. So, Michael, I want to talk about, there was a lot of talk when the RICO charges were filed in Georgia against Donald Trump and company, including Rudy Giuliani. A lot of talk about whether there could be a jury that would be selected in that state, given a red state, that would actually hold any of these defendants accountable. We've seen a flurry of motions filed, most of them denied by the court. So it looks like unless these individuals, particularly someone like Rudy Giuliani, enters into some kind of plea agreement, his case is going to move forward. What are you thinking now that we have this $148 million verdict from jurors in Georgia? What are you thinking about, the likelihood that jurors could likewise find Rudy Giuliani guilty on some of the RICO charges that have been filed? Recognize, there's a different standard in a civil versus a criminal case, but I think we should try to read something into this big verdict.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Fani Willis has laid out 161 overt acts and she laid out 8 methods of the enterprise. Method number 4, I'm looking at page 17 of the indictment out of Fulton County, harassment and intimidation of Fulton County election worker Ruby Freeman. It talks about harassment of her. It talks about false statements that Rudy Giuliani made to the State Senate Judiciary Committee as well. So I think they can find impartial jurors, people who may have voted for Trump, may have voted for Biden, may have set out the election, but can set aside their political views and render a decision based solely upon the evidence. Okay. And now this is a criminal trial, so it is beyond a reasonable doubt, higher standard than civil case, which is preponderance of the evidence, 50% plus 1. But it's reading through this indictment, and I actually did a broadcast on the African History Network show dealing with this. There's overwhelming evidence of their of guilt. And a lot of this is caught, at least with Trump and the phone call he had with Secretary of State Raffensperger. A lot of this is on tape as well, recorded. This is the overwhelming evidence of their guilt.
Michael, you should be adding lawyer to that list of titles that you have, the way you just described the burden of proof in civil versus criminal cases. What do you think, David? He did a pretty good job on that. David, I do want to ask you, though, Michael raises a great point that in that indictment, a part of the RICO indictment talks about the harassment of these 2 women who just got this verdict against Rudy Giuliani, who had a court determined that he had, in fact, defamed them. How will the jury's verdict, the court's determination come into play, if at all, in the RICO case? Let's make it plain. Can Fani Willis run into that criminal court and say, look, Your Honor, a judge in a civil case already determined that he defamed these 2 women, and the jurors believed it so much they awarded these 2 women $148 million.
Yeah, so there was an interesting maneuver that the Giuliani legal team pulled in the recent defamation case, which is that they stipulated, quote unquote, for this litigation only as to the falsity of certain statements. They did that to avoid the need for presumably the overwhelming and crushing proof that Michael refers to. And Michael, you can have my title as lawyer if you want it. I can get a good deal on it for you. But because there was a limitation on that stipulation, I presume that the Giuliani team down in Georgia will argue that it shouldn't be admissible because it was just a legal stipulation for that particular case. As to whether they'll find impartial jurors, I don't know. They may have to comb the entire South. They may have to go from Kentucky to Tennessee to Georgia to Florida to Arkansas to find, jurors that haven't heard about this or can, render an impartial verdict. But ultimately, presumably, that's part of the cross that you bear when you are a public figure. You are susceptible to having a jury of your peers who may have heard of you in the past and may have heard of these stories. Just impartiality doesn't mean necessarily that you've never heard of the dispute or never heard of what's going on. It just means that you're able, as Michael said, to render a fair verdict based upon the evidence and without bias in favor of either party.
So you don't think we're going to see race judicata type motions filed by the prosecutors to try to use the judge's determination about defamation? And it's probably not race judicata in the truest sense, but I wouldn't be surprised if the prosecution doesn't try to enter into some of the evidence from this civil trial into this criminal case. But maybe the overwhelming evidence is such that they won't even need to, because the racist, vile, comments that we saw coming towards these women after Rudy Giuliani made those statements about them passing around this USB, gadget like it was vials of cocaine and heroin. It was just such a horrifically defaming statement. Maybe jurors will just see it on its face. But let's talk, Michael, about the election, because all of this is about ultimately who's going to be in the White House, who's going to be in Congress, who's going to be in the Senate next year. And we know that Trump has been on a mission to delay every criminal trial that has been set against him, or every trial that he's involved in. And presumably Rudy Giuliani wants to do the same. And the hope is Trump's going to win the election. He's going to dismantle our Department of Justice. He's going to wave a magic wand and make all of these lawsuits go away, which we know there's some control that Trump may have over these federal prosecutors. Doesn't have that level of direct control over state prosecutors, but obviously can use the bully pulpit of, that the president will have to try to influence maybe the state legislature in Georgia to impeach Fani Willis. Who knows? Trump gets very creative when he goes after his enemies. But how do we make sure people understand the gravity of what's at stake and how these cases, these jury verdicts, like the one we've seen against Trump earlier, E. Jean Carroll, and now Rudy Giuliani, that these things mean something?
Yeah, I think what has to happen, number one, we have to explain to people what is at stake. If you take women's reproductive rights and the overturning of Roe versus Wade, kicking it back to the states, that was as a result of Donald Trump getting 3 Supreme Court justices confirmed. And keep in mind also, Donald Trump got 226 federal judges confirmed. The Supreme Court justices and the federal judges came from lists submitted to Donald Trump from the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. So we saw, as a consequence of a Trump election, with the help of Senator Mitch McConnell, who had control with Republicans in control of the U.S. Senate after the 2014 midterm elections, them pushing through the Supreme Court justices. Amy Coney Barrett was pushed through in about 8 days right before the 2020 election. And these are lifetime appointments, whether we talk about federal judges, whether we talk about Supreme Court justices. I remember back in the 2016 presidential election, I was covering the election for the radio station I used to be on, 910 AM WFDF here in Detroit. And I saw about 100 different speeches that Donald Trump gave, and I saw numerous interviews with Republicans and Trump supporters. And the overwhelming mantra was, this is about the Supreme Court. This is about the federal courts. Okay. Whereas, unfortunately, I heard some woke progressive Democrats saying, I don't like Hillary Clinton, things like this. They didn't understand what was at stake. Okay. The first thing I tell my listeners to do, and in my history classes I teach, is read the U.S. Constitution, because if you understand the U.S. Constitution, you'll understand the Electoral College. The Republicans understood the Electoral College and engaged in voter suppression tactics in Michigan, where I am, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I live 4 minutes away from the TCF Center. That became a almost battleground, like outside. Okay, dispute wanting the stopping of the counting of the votes, making erroneous allegations about fraud, things of this nature. So once people get to see, understand law, okay, I tell people we have to understand history, economics, law, and politics. And incidentally, when I enrolled at Wayne State University fall of 1989, I enrolled as a pre-law major. I was going to be an attorney, but I ended up switching and graduating from their business school. Okay, so, but I did take business law in the business school.
Probably a good choice.
Yeah. So we have to lay out to people what's at stake. At the top of the ticket is saving the democracy, explaining to people what a democracy is democracy versus autocracy, democracy versus fascism, and then dealing with women's reproductive rights, voting rights, policies, and also policies that are beneficial for African Americans, are beneficial for America in general. Okay, so it's laying out on the line what's at stake, because we can lose all of this in the November 2024 election.
No, well said, Michael. Absolutely. When we come forward, David, got to talk about this appeal. No one on this panel believes it has a snowball's chance in hell to go anywhere. But of course, Rudy Giuliani is out there saying he's going to appeal. He's going to appeal. And also some of the statements his lawyers made about his mental capacity. Some very weird things were said by his own attorneys. So when we come forward, more on this nuclear verdict of $148 million against America's disgraced mayor, Rudy Giuliani, right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Cordelai Corte, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union. Weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time. That's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. As KBLA Talk 1580's chief national political analyst, every day you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, A More Perfect Union was designed for you. This daily political affairs show will feature notable journalists, industry leaders, lawmakers, change makers, tastemakers, and ordinary people motivated to do their part to reach beyond today's divisions, to make sense out of news of the day, and offer us all a chance to build a more perfect union. Come on and join me.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like your style, though.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities and sports figures, elected leaders and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva Martin in real time, your commute just became the
We are back with David Sarsi. He is a litigation attorney in the city of New York. He once worked in the administration of Rudy Giuliani when Rudy was the mayor. And Michael M. Hoptep, he is a historian, he's a professor, he's a radio host, and he's probably a lawyer who just doesn't know it yet. We're going to work on that, David and I. But they have been breaking it down for us in terms of what's going on with Rudy Giuliani. Okay, David, of course, everybody that's, loses a case, whether it's civil or criminal, they all say they're going to appeal. And we know for Donald Trump, appealing is part of his playbook to delay. Do you think Rudy Giuliani, who has no money apparently, who already owes a bunch of lawyers money, civil lawyers don't tend to file appeals, which can be very complicated, very time-consuming, without getting a pretty big retainer check up front. At least that's not how we do it in California. So what do you think the chances of Rudy Giuliani actually having a competent lawyer be able to file an appeal of this case on his behalf?
Well, when he was interviewed after the verdict came down, he made some what I thought were uncharacteristically insecure comments that we might move for a new trial. The lack of decisiveness on the part of Rudy Giuliani was really jarring to my ears to hear him say that he might move for a new trial and he would certainly appeal. I do question what the basis of the appeal would be. Presumably, it would be something to the effect that the jury's damages were outsized or not reasonable or not proportionate. But I think if you compare the verdict here to the settlement in the Fox News Dominion litigation, what you're looking for is some basis. The court is going to be looking for some basis upon which a reasonable jury could conclude that there's a connection between the damages that are awarded and the damage that was caused. Here you have incontrovertible evidence of of Rudy's conduct. I mean, he's stipulated to it. You've got a litigant who abused the litigation process, but perhaps most importantly, you've got some really, really nasty evidence about the impact on these women of his comments and what it touched off. Really, kind of a national assault on these two litigants. I think a reasonable jury could come up with a number of, $30 million, $15 million a piece for the defamatory conduct, $20 million a piece for intentional infliction of emotional distress. You might see some kind of cramming that down by a judge or by an appeal, but you're probably talking certainly in the $5 to $10 million range. I think would be very, very reasonable. Especially we saw Trump's litigation up in New York. And then you have a multiplier on that for the punitive damages for the willfulness and egregiousness. Here, the jury basically added a 1x multiplier. They added $75 million to compensatory damages of $75 million. That's certainly within the realm of reason, seeing another turn on the damages. So I don't really see that there's a real solid basis for reducing this liability, maybe on the margins, but on the liability, I just don't see it. I don't think a court is going to be very sympathetic to a litigant like Rudy Giuliani, who stuck his thumb in the eye of the judicial system, had repeated opportunities to comply with discovery orders, and even before this verdict came out, a scathing 80-page or 70-page decision on his misconduct in the judicial process, which again is just stunning for a guy who made his name as a law and order prosecutor and law and order mayor to have completely abdicated any responsibility to the judicial system. Look, that's why we disbarred him in New York. He's no longer a lawyer here because of this kind of conduct.
Well, that means he can't make any money, Michael, unless he is in federal prison getting that 30 cents an hour. So I hate it when this happens, when there's a big verdict for plaintiffs and there's no deep pocket, there's no insurance, there's no, corporation that can pay it. But this verdict has more meaning than just money, obviously. That's why these women pursued this litigation. That's why they were able to find a lawyer that will pursue the litigation, knowing that there may not be a deep pocket at the end of the day. But it's so important to hold people accountable, like Rudy Giuliani. But Michael, we heard some comments by his lawyers. I don't know, they were kind of on the margin, toying around with the idea that he may have some cognitive decline. What did you make of some of those comments? And do you see Rudy, starting to put into motion some notion that he is declining cognitively as a way to perhaps save himself from this other more serious litigation that he's going to face, litigation that could end him literally doing time in a prison?
Right. Well, if it's proven that Rudy Giuliani is suffering from some type of cognitive decline, I don't think that would be surprising to many people, judging from his comments, judging from his behavior. That's possible. Now, you have other people who knew him back in New York. And, I know David used to work under him, but you have other people who knew him back in New York who were African Americans who were never fond of him in the first place. They remember when he led a revolt against the first African American mayor of New York, David Dinkins. They remember comments that he made, et cetera. So you have some African Americans in New York and the New York area who are saying this is who he's always been. Okay, it's just coming out more now. He's more unhinged now. So we'll see what happens with this. But this, once again, this is I did a post on my fan page, the African History Network, and I posted the snapshot of the story from NBC News, $148 million settlement, and I used the track from Taylor Swift called Karma, because a lot of people are saying this is karma for him, as well as the same thing's going to happen to Donald Trump, as well as these 18 co-conspirators in Georgia, et cetera. So all this is coming back on them. And the 2024 election is I have contended that the January 6, 2021 insurrection is a continuation of the Civil War and the political violence we saw after the Civil War that brought an end to the Reconstruction era. Okay. And you're going to see this continue in 2024 also.
So, Michael, real quickly, how come none of this stench is rubbing off on Donald Trump? Right? These are people in his immediate circle. This was his personal lawyer that was out there advocating for him, fighting the fight, filing, as you said, those 62 lawsuits claiming that the election had been stolen. This was his right-hand man who now has been, determined to be a liar, a defamer, and who has this big verdict. Why isn't there like guilt by association?
Well, you're in an off-year election. This is 2023. A lot of people are not dialed into the minutia of what's taking place. You're going we're in the Christmas season, et cetera. In 2024, as you get further into 2024, especially if one of these cases go to trial, but as you get further into 2024 in the presidential election season, then people will start paying more attention. I think it's important for people with platforms like yours, like mine, et cetera, to provide the evidence for people and provide the sources. I have a motto at the African History Network: proper documentation ends all conversation. And this is how my teachers taught me. This is what we deal with. So once people get to see what has happened and the consequences and understand laws and policies, then I think people will see what's at stake and make the correct decision in 2024. It's not just about the presidency. It's also about the Senate and the House of Representatives.
Well, I surely hope you were right. A lot of evidence today and a lot of pressure today, at least coming out to get Clarence Thomas to recuse himself from that immunity case that the Supreme Court is going to be ruling on. So you're right. It's the holidays. People aren't dialed into the election next year. So hopefully we'll see some differences. Thank you so much, David Slarski. Always a pleasure to spend some time with you. Your insights are invaluable. And Michael in Hopetep, tell us where we can listen to you and find you, because I know you have a radio show as well. I want to give you a plug.
Yeah, visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We're on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on my social media platforms. So we have the information right on the website. And I teach online history classes. I'm teaching one Tuesday, December 19th, 2023, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have the information on our website, so you can register for it there, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com.
Well, thank you, Michael. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Happy holidays to both of you. The next
Happy holidays, Areva.
Robin Ayers and the Ra Report right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Don't touch that dial.
Boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580.